you want to start?
Well, I was just gonna say, as we said to each other earlier, he and I could probably talk to each other for an hour or 5, and it might even be fun. But we're here to take your questions. But I know Lee has some stuff he wanted to start with to help create a context for the conversation, and then we can go from there. So, without further ado.
I want some damn ado.
You deserve some ado.
Woo!
I'll do without.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here again. Although it's not so much again because I live down the street at Broadview now. And if you want to ask any questions later about that, it's an interesting change in the college, addition to the life of the college, and I'll be happy to tell you what I can tell you about it. I do want to start with a little bit of sad news that I think some of you may know, which is that Richard Stack passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was 89, and his health had been troubled for some time. He was a great colleague and a founder of the college. You know, if this college is indeed committed to thinking wide open, part of the reason is that Richard was there to see that spirit was infused and formed into the college. So that's a real loss. Now, on the other hand, it's an incredibly beautiful day. I'm sure you noticed it walking around the campus. It feels like everything that could be in bloom is in bloom. And of course, that's right. And that's the bad news about it. Because what that is, among other things, in addition to being the reason your allergies are intolerable, it's a marker of climate change. And although beautiful as it is, it's a sign of danger. I was just actually sitting out in the courtyard before I came in, and I have my Merlin app that identifies birds on. And one of the birds it picked up was a blackpoll warbler. Traditionally, blackpoll warblers don't show up here for another 2 weeks. And so generally speaking, spring has shifted about 10 days to 2 weeks earlier. And you know, I was thinking, the reason I bring this up, and I thought this was part of my mandate, as it were, is to think about the half century as it's unfolded from when I began teaching here in 1975, and it's 2025, right?
Yes.
2025. And you know, I have several things I just wanted to note about those 50 years here at Purchase and for the community. And one of them, of course, is it's been a half century of climate change and of the mounting dangers of it, if you will. For me, this is also connected to the fact that one of the interesting things about my career over those 50 years is I sort of a little bit became a natural science faculty person. Because I taught a course on birds. I had always wanted to. I was later in my career, I thought, maybe I can do this. And I had a course called Birds and Literature, but the environmental studies people very generously allowed me to list it as an environmental studies course. You know, they were certainly under no obligation to do so, but it meant I would have, and I did, I would have science students as well as lit students, and it made for an incredibly interesting course and an interesting enhancement of my career. You know, I do want to say about my career that one of the promises I made myself, and I'm going to sort of come back to this later, is that I would never just repeat what I had always done, and that every year from whenever I conceived this till the end of my career, I would teach a new course. Maybe, you know, sometimes it was a new course for me, a course someone else had taught, and I hadn't, but often it was a course that I formulated and invented, and this kind of shift into doing birds was a great addition to me. Really enhanced my career in very nice kinds of ways. The other big surprise, which happened much earlier, the big sort of added route in my teaching life, was the one that, in some sense or other, I became best known for, and that's the Bible. It was in the early 80s, I think, maybe the late 70s. I came into what we then called Board of Study meeting, and I said to the lit people, I got dirty. I said, I'm tired of having students who don't know anything about the Bible, who read American Lit with all of its religious reference and don't know what any of it is. We need a course on the Bible. And everybody nodded sagely, and then someone, it was probably Myra, someone said, so who's going to teach this course? Right? And everyone looked at me, implying it was your idea. And it was my idea, and so I said, okay, but I had never taken, still haven't, a course on the Bible in any context ever. So it meant I had to start learning the Bible. And that's been a great addition to my own background, my material, my teaching life, so on and so forth. And learning more and more about the Bible. It's not an easy course to exhaust, an easy text to exhaust, has been another great addition to my career. What I found also, I'm making a transition here, what I found also was that the element of the Bible, so generally, sort of edged by in a lot of Bible teaching, was prophecy. I found a great affinity to prophecy. My favorite is Jeremiah. I've written about Jeremiah. But I'm also very fond of Ezekiel. And you read along in Ezekiel, and there's a passage, it's during the siege by the Babylonians. Ezekiel is in the city, and he says, a hole has fallen in the wall of the city. And the false prophets go to this wall, and they slap cheap plaster on it and so forth, and say, look, everything is fine. And then Ezekiel says, I think you'll catch the transition here, but a hard rain is going to fall, he says, and wash that out, and all the falsehood that it represents. Which is to say, my career included the miracle of Bob Dylan being awarded the Nobel Prize. and believe me, I think this was brilliant on the part of the Nobel people. If you have any doubt, if you haven't done this already, watch Patti Smith sing A Hard Rain is Going to Fall to the Nobel Committee. First time I saw it, I cried for a half hour after I watched it. And every now and then you hear people say, oh, but he's a singer. This is music, not literature. And I think, does that mean, had it been an issue, you would have refused the Nobel Prize to Homer and to Sappho, and especially to Euripides? Because, I know many of you studied this stuff when you were here, and will remember that Greek tragedies were musicals, and that song and dance, the job of the chorus, was at the center of the tragic play. In fact, its origin, probably. And I love the story, although it's questionable, that Athenian prisoners during the wars with Sparta could earn freedom from prison by singing the songs from Euripides' tragedies. So there's a tradition, there's a background to all this, and I think that Dylan fits in it really extraordinarily. I saw in a comment, this isn't original with me, I saw in a comment on some video I was watching, someone said, it was a Prince video, a great Prince video. And the comment was, the earth is 4.5 billion years old, and you lived at the same time as Prince and David Bowie. Now, each of us will fill in names in slightly different ways, but that's also been a kind of fact of my 50 years here. It's been 50 years of great music, and you know, I put Dylan and the Beatles and Joan Baez and Johnny Mitchell in that slot, but you know, we all have our, and Patti Smith, we all have our particular choices. And that's been a great fact for me of those 50 years as well. Just one or two other things very quickly. Some of you may have been around in the early 1990s when we put on 2 Shakespeare plays. Did you see this? No. Our Shakespeare scholar was also a theater person, and things were much more flexible. And we put on 2 Shakespeare plays. First, we put on Midsummer Night's Dream, and that was sort of a lark. We did it outside. It was a lot of fun. But then we did a very serious production of Merchant of Venice. And acting in that production was really another of the highlights of my 50 years here. It was an all-campus production. They even somehow got permission for acting students to perform. That was a really big deal. And we even had an Equity actor playing Antonio. We got permission from Equity to appear in our production. But what I want to note, I mean, I could talk about Merchant of Venice for hours here too, is that I was the only person in the cast who had no training as an actor. It's a little like teaching the Bible, I guess. And I learned so much from watching all these trained acting people. I learned, for example, how much acting happens with the body. And I learned how terribly I had misused my voice for all those years and would continue to. You know, it's amazing that in grad school they don't even give you one seminar on the use of your voice and body. It would have made a huge difference, but you know, that's beneath us, I presume. But anyway, it was a very great experience, and I was all set, sort of, to try to do 2 more with Eric, our Shakespearean. I told him I would try Prospero I played Shylock in Merchant. Try Prospero in The Tempest, and then if they give me a semester off, I would try Lear. But I thought, it's impossible to do Lear and do anything else. But it never happened. Eric left, he went to Italy. Nobody stepped up to take this over. So my career was short, but very intense. I was, this is really my last point in a little coda. I came here as an Americanist. And although I taught over 50 years, I think, I counted once and then forgot, but it's something like between 45 and 50 different courses. And everything from the Bible and the ancient epic to contemporary poetry, everything except, you know, as some of you know, I wouldn't touch the English novel, and I wouldn't touch the 18th century. If somebody wants to teach the 18th century, I say good for them, but it certainly wasn't me. But you know, I've talked frequently. I have always talked about America as an experiment, and an experiment, the results of which have been up in the air for the whole time. And I think these days we feel that uncertainty about the success of the American experiment more than ever. My own interest in America shifted. I came as a sort of specialist in modern American poetry, but I shifted more to the 19th century. This is another of those kind of shifts affecting the shape of my career. And the text that rose up to be the center of my imaginative life was Moby Dick, which I must have read 15 times now, maybe 20, and have. I meant to bring this from my office and forgot. I think I have Moby Dick in 9 or 10 different languages. And one of my favorites is that when I was in India, I asked the guy to see if he could find it in Hindi anywhere. Couldn't find it anywhere in India. I mentioned this to one of my classes. I had a student of Indian ethnicity, and her mom found me a copy of Moby Dick in Hindi. So I even have it in Hindi. I can't read it in Hindi, but I have it in Hindi. And I could not only talk about Moby Dick for hours, but for forever. But I think of what makes my hair stand on end, as it is doing now, as Emily Dickinson says, it's the sign you're in the real place, is the notion of the floodgates of the wonder world swinging open. That's what Ishmael says at the end of the first chapter, as he sets off on his whaling voyage, that the floodgates of the wonder world swung open. And frankly, that's kind of how this has felt to me. I was interviewed for a journalism project by a student the other day, actually, and her last question was about burnout. And I thought, what's that? and she said, how did you not, 15 years, how did you not burn out? How could that be? And I said, well, there were 3 reasons, basically. One is, I got to teach this amazing literature. And sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and they're going to pay me to talk about Moby Dick or Emily Dickinson. How did I work that out? And another is I had for almost my entire 50 years really remarkable colleagues. But what I really had was great students. And what that meant was many, many things, but more than anything else, I never left a class, not a course, but a class meeting, without the sense that I had learned something. That I had learned something from my students, from the way in which this discussion with them had provoked learning in me. And I always knew that being a professor was really being a student. 50 years as a student, where, what is it, Sweden? They pay you to be a student rather than you having to pay. That's the secret, and it's no secret. And I just want to say one other thing, and that is that we know in our age, this moment, that people are not talking to each other. And one of the really critical things about a liberal arts education, we talk a lot about a liberal arts education with us, but more than anything else, I think, is it gets us talking to each other. And it becomes a model and an experience of that kind of negotiation, if you will. And it's been an honor to have participated in it. And it's been a thrill to have such wonderful students to participate with. So thank you, and I think the county.
Not the county.
I'm going to chat and take any questions that people have. I think that's the way we're going to
Yes,
do it.
that's the way we're going to go.
Okay.
So just a bit of introduction about myself. I am a class of 1996, political science from here. One of my biggest regrets from here is that I never did take the Bible class, so maybe we'll have to set something up. But actually, when I posted online that I was going to be facilitating this conversation with Lee, that's the response that I got was, that's the most amazing class I ever took, was with Lee. And so it's an honor to be standing up here with you, my colleague. But after I graduated in 1996, I spent 10 years here in student affairs, including as up to interim dean of students, and then went to SUNY Downstate, now called Health Sciences University. So I'm currently the vice president for academic and student affairs there. But I want to echo some things that Lee said. First of all, if you ever bring something up in a meeting, you have to be willing to do it yourself. That happens all the time.
I was young, Jeffrey.
Oh, I know, we all were there, we have all been there. Yes, that's a good lesson to learn. But absolutely, even in student affairs, even as an administrator, I learn from our students every day. I will not be doing surgery anytime soon, don't worry. But you learn every day from students and from fellow alums and from faculty and from each other. I think that's a great thing. And this place, Purchase, is a really, really special place. It's a special place to me, but it is a special place, period. And when you go out and you talk, and I try to advocate for Purchase still in SUNY and in the state, it's the think wide open phrase. I remember when we came up with it way back when, and it really does fit this place, because it's not about the conflict, but it is about that liberal arts and that way of thinking and that way of broadening your thinking so that you can go out there and have these conversations, even with people with whom you disagree. And I think that's really important. And it's absolutely, whether you're literature, whether you're environmental science, whether you're political science, whether you're dance, film, music, whatever, studio comp, whatever your major was here, that's still something that's ingrained in all of us as Purchase alums. And I just think it's such an amazing, wonderful place. And so I continue to support it, as I know Lee does when you live here now, so you don't really have a choice. But we wanted to open this up to a conversation. Any questions? Otherwise, the two of us can talk. We can tell stories.
I got
lots
a million.
of stories. I got a million too. And last night I was standing outside the Stewed. Still what I call it. They call it the Stewed now. It's all good. I was here when they rebuilt that building from the original Butler building that was there. But just telling stories for like an hour and a half with people. Oh, remember when this happened, and remember when this happened, and some of the things I'm glad the statute of limitations are over on. We tell those stories too. But I'd like to open it up if there are any questions. Otherwise, we can just tell stories. Anyone have any?
Can I ask a quick question of the audience? How many of you, is this your first time in the new humanities building? Okay, so you walked in and you expected to see the big bang.
You wanted to walk over the stairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's not there. We begged them to keep
it
that, but they wouldn't do it. And it was part of the full philosophy, if you want to put it that way, of the building, which is it put obstacles in your way, but allowed you
Create a path.
create a path.
Yeah.
And it was I thought the best architectural choice in the entire building.
Well, it created that sense of connection because people would sit there,
Yeah.
but inevitably you would be in a rush to get to class.
How many times
You'd have to climb
run
over that
over
thing.
it,
Yeah.
up the stairs.
And it was part of the Purchase experience. And when I came in here for the first time and it was gone,
Yeah.
it was quite jarring.
When did they open the new
Do you remember the date?
15-ish, yeah.
Yeah. What happened was there was a leak in the ceiling.
Mhm.
And what happened is what always happened, they
Right.
discovered asbestos.
Right.
And when they discovered asbestos, the idea was clean it
Not
out.
the whole thing. Yeah.
And what they did, basically, was bring this building down to girders.
Mhm.
I mean, you could stand over there and see the dorm through the building over there, and then rebuilt it from that. So this is really, really rebuilt, and, you know, in some ways they followed the basic.
They did follow the basic plan. I mean, they absolutely upgraded all the rooms, they moved the bathrooms for some reason to the middle of the hall.
Yeah.